Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin. Lengthening cycle theory strikes back. Or does it? If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So if you follow my channel for long enough, you know I'm a proponent of the idea of cycles lengthening and not us going to this ridiculous 300K predictions by September that you'll see promoted on a lot of other channels. I don't think a 300K by September, a 300K Bitcoin by September makes any sense at all. But what we want to do is we want to go through a lot of the different measurements and do an update as to where we are in the current cycle. Okay, so we're going to go through our little bar pattern, but we're really going to break things down as best as we can. And I know some of you guys like to measure it from the halving. We'll do that in a video coming up relatively soon, so obviously be on the lookout for that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the bottom of the wicks. We're not going to take it to this wick, because I don't even know if I believe this wick. I don't, going down to a penny. This one seems a little bit more believable over here. And if you just measure it, if you measure these bottoms, and then look at the ROI of Bitcoin over that cycle as measured from the bottom, you'll see the returns that it put in. So that's cycle 1. Again, this is cycle 2. Okay, this is cycle 2 here. We're gonna color this one yellow. And then we're also gonna show, of course, cycle 3. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is we've talked a lot about lengthening cycles for a long time, and obviously with Bitcoin going to 64K this early in the cycle, it calls into question, okay, well, is this cycle actually going to lengthen? And I think we still need to be somewhat flexible in where we stand on that, because we need to see what the summer has in store for Bitcoin. Okay, now you might wonder, well, why do I say or does it? Well, to be completely fair to the people that think it's going to go up to 300K by the end of the year, if you look at where we are with respect to last cycle, hey, we're still right on schedule. So in terms of where we are compared to last cycle, you can't necessarily say that we're not on track for a $300,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. But my contention has always been that cycle 4, so this is cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3. My contention has always been, even when we were back over here, that cycle 4, at the end of the cycle, when we look back at it, it will not be able to keep up with cycle 3. It just simply won't be able to do it. So it happens to be that during the last cycle, we also had a correction around this time. And that's why I don't want us to get too carried away here with our short-term predictions or anything, because in fact, as of last cycle, from this point, we were heading down. And we could go, so the price of Bitcoin could go to say $33,000 over the next month, and we could still theoretically be on track with the last cycle. Okay, I know that might sound crazy. This is, of course, as measured from the halving, as measured from the cycle bottom, not the halving. We're gonna talk about the halving in another video, so I know some people prefer that, and I promise you we will look at that. But when you look at it as measured from the bottom, we're still more or less on track with the last cycle. But I'm making the prediction that as the months drag on, ultimately we will not be able to keep pace with it, okay? Now, to give you an idea, where would Bitcoin need to go in order to keep pace with it? So if you think that, that lengthening cycles is a bunch of, garbage, nonsense, and whatnot, that's fine. Let's talk about what milestones would need to be hit for you to, for us to have that, say, $300,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. So we probably would need to be looking at close to a $90,000 Bitcoin by August, okay? By October, we would need to be looking at a $140,000 Bitcoin. And then by November or so, we would need to be looking at approximately a $300,000 Bitcoin. So we're certainly not going to say that it can't happen, but we've also made the comparisons before as well that, at one point cycle 4 was ahead of cycle 2 and we weren't able to keep pace with it. And right now, cycle 4 is ahead of cycle 3. And again, my contention is that we will not be able to keep pace with it over the long term, Now, that doesn't mean we can't bounce. Imagine a scenario where we bounce back up and then continue. My point is I don't think we're going to be able to ultimately keep pace with the last cycle. So what does that mean? Well, one of the things we can do, again, is we can compare these from the cycle bottom to the cycle peak, and we can do it a number of ways to discuss where we could theoretically be. Now remember, the first cycle took place over around 266 days. The second cycle was about 742 days, and the third cycle was approximately 1,071 days. So to go from, say, the cycle bottom, which is around this area, somewhere in that area, we're already out about 900 and something days. If we were to have the cycle peak at 1,071 days, that would in fact put the cycle peak in November. Okay, so that would put the cycle peak in November if we were to keep pace with the last cycle. And my contention is that, I think one common argument against the lengthening cycle theory is, well, why would it be different this time? And I think it's not different, it's just continuing this trend, right? So 266 days, 742 days, 1,071 days. My guess is this one's going to be even longer. And so when you look at this, when we look at, say, like a pragmatic approach to this, what do we say? Well, if the cycle peak is somewhere out way over here or something, then, what if we just do something like this, where we ultimately trend up, but it just takes longer than a lot of people expect. And that way you get those lengthened cycles and diminished returns, right? And even though it seems like right now things, at least over the last several months, it seemed like we were going to go straight up. Obviously, you can get these cool down periods. Now, one interesting thing that we like to make the comparison of is back to 2019. Now, I'm not going to argue that 2019 is anything like today, because I don't think it is, but what if you get a slow bleed like in 2019 and then it continues up later on? Okay, so what if it does something like that? I don't think it would go quite that high, okay? So I'd probably cut it off somewhere sooner than a $300-something thousand Bitcoin, because that would put us at an ROI similar to the last cycle. But what if it did do something like that? That's the idea. Like, what if it did? And if it did, and if it had a slow bleed, it might not just be a ripping the Band-Aid off type thing. It might not just be like ripping it off and watching it go down so that we can immediately rebound. It could just be a slow bleed for a few months. Okay, and that's one scenario that we could see if in fact Bitcoin is unable to hold the 20-week SMA or the 21-week EMA. And then if it did something like that, then again, I think it would present an opportunity. Now, some people don't like measuring from bottom to peak, okay? Some people prefer other types of measurements. We could go peak to peak, which is probably the worst way to do it, but we'll start with that one as the second one. So that was 910 days, and then this one was 1,488 days. So if we had another 1,488 days, it would put us in around January of 2022. But if it were longer, let's say, 1,800 days or something like that, we'd be looking at the end of 2022 or maybe sometime in 2023. Now, again, peak to peak is probably the worst way to do it. What if we measure bottom to bottom? Let's go bottom to bottom. So 400 something days, and then we go, 1,000, 1,100 days, and then this one about 1,400 days. So again, if the next one were 1,435 days like the last cycle, we would be looking at approximately the end of 2022, which is when most people would assume that the bottom would be, in line with the idea of a 4-year cycle. and we'll contend that it is a possibility. Okay, with a $44,000 Bitcoin this early in the cycle, we'll contend it as a possibility. We also want to be somewhat flexible and say, well, yeah, I mean, it could happen. It certainly could happen, but what if it takes longer and the next cycle bottom isn't, so this one was again 448 days, 1155, 1435. What if the next one's like 1800? Then the cycle bottom could be the end of 2023 rather than the end of 2022. Okay, so that's just one way to look at it. So remember, at the end of the day, we know there's going to be periods of moves up with Bitcoin, and there's going to be periods where it moves down for a while. From a fundamental perspective, which we don't talk about fundamentals that much, from a fundamental perspective, obviously this cycle seems to be the cycle of institutions. Okay, now arguably a lot of institutions haven't even come on board yet. And I think that we're going to spend a lot of time waiting for them to actually come on board. Okay, obviously there have been a few institutions that have come on board, maybe more than a few, but some of the big ones haven't come on board yet. And you can't necessarily blame them when you have the price of Bitcoin up 20x in about 15 months. Some institutions might be a little bit weary of coming in when it's pumped so much. Now, if we were to see a slight correction, then that could allow more of these larger institutions that have not come on board yet. We haven't been hearing a lot of big names recently. That could allow for the final leg of the bull market. Okay, that could allow for the final leg of it to get these larger institutions on board, not just some of the smaller ones. Obviously, Tesla's not that small, but they did sell 10% of their Bitcoin, and now they're no longer accepting it as payment for Tesla cars. So, again, I think it's going to take some time. Also, when it comes to regulation, it seems kind of strange that you can have Elon Musk just basically constantly tweeting stuff out and significantly moving the price of cryptocurrencies in the top 5 or in the top 10. Seems like there's probably going to be some level of regulation coming, which honestly would probably be a good thing for institutions to come on board. If you're a big institution, okay, like imagine you're Apple, okay, imagine you're Amazon. Imagine you're some of these larger BlackRock, right? This would be a big one. So imagine you're these institutions and you're watching the crypto asset class and you're watching Bitcoin go up, and you're also watching, the founder of Tesla just basically pumping a meme coin constantly. Makes it sort of seem like a joke to some degree. And it's like, is that something we really want to get into? If we were to come back down, again, I think that would present another timely opportunity. I don't even know if we're going to come back down. I think there is a non-negligible chance, okay, and I should say this, there is a non-negligible chance that the Bitcoin just kind of chops sideways for a while. And maybe it goes down some and comes back up. And maybe it does something like that where we just have this long accumulation phase that takes place over many, many months rather than just a few days or a few weeks. So let's not completely discount that. What I'm skeptical of is the ability to keep pace with the last cycle as we continue to navigate the current cycle. That's what I would be skeptical of. Okay. Now, you're probably wondering, well, are we going to close below the bull market support band? We are getting a close here in a few hours. Well, it depends on when you're watching the video. 3 hours from the time that I'm making this video. We are currently below it. There is still a chance we hold it. In order to hold it, we would need to close above 46,230. That would be holding the 21-week EMA. In order to get to the 20-week SMA, we'd have to go up to 48,430. So in order, we're looking at another a move of $2,000 up to get back to the 21-week EMA, $4,000 up to get back to the 20-week SMA. I don't know if it's going to happen. Obviously, we would need to have a pretty strong move back up in the next few hours for us to actually be able to do that. And so what I will say is that if we do drop below and you're looking at it like, oh no, this is the worst thing in the world, Remember, as we've always said, as we've always contended, bull markets can make you money, bear markets can make you rich. I don't think we're going to have like a 2-year bear market. I don't think we're going to have like a I don't think we're going to have something like this. I don't think we're going to have something like this where it drops like 85% and then we chop sideways for another year, a year and a half from there before we go back into a bull market. I don't think anything like that's going to happen. But is it possible that we do something like this? I think that's possible. Okay, I think that's possible. Like, you know, a short little bear market is certainly possible. And the reason I say that is not because I think it's going to happen. It's just when you look at monthly candles and look to see how far we moved up relatively quickly, coming back down for a few months isn't the worst idea in the world. Now, if we want to be completely fair to the comparison to 2013, you know, we did have a couple months where we moved down and then we just started moving back up. And that's why I want us to be a little bit cautious about, you know, saying that, okay, it's not going to go up to these ridiculous price predictions in 2021, because we know that sentiment can change on a dime, just like it did over here, right? We came down for a couple months and then we actually came right back up. Okay, so again, here we're coming down for a couple months. It's possible we go straight back up. And this is why we need to really watch what Bitcoin does as we get into the summer. As we get into the summer, are we experiencing a slow bleed like this, in which case we'll have to regroup? Or are we going back up and moving up relatively quickly and going to 6 figures by the end of the summer? If we're going to 6 figures by the end of the summer, then you could certainly make the case that the peak for the cycle will happen in 2021 and not later on, if we start moving back up to say 6 figures by this summer. Remember though, there's a lot of price predictions that say like $300,000 to $400,000 Bitcoin by September, by October, by November, by December. The data suggests that that's very unlikely to happen. Now, if it does happen, great. That'll be great. And at that time, I mean, if we're sitting here in December and we're looking at the price of Bitcoin and it's $300,000, then I'll be running for the hills with my profits. I mean, if I'm being completely honest. If we're sitting here in say 3 or 4 months and the price of Bitcoin still hasn't moved past 40 or 50K, we're just kind of either chopping sideways or maybe we're going down to the 20 to 30K region. Hey guys, it makes sense with the idea of lengthened cycles that we're not going to immediately go to 6 figures. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully this pragmatic look at the market is useful for people. Remember, this is not a day trading channel. We just want to look at the larger trends within the market and try to understand where we could be. Okay, that's the purpose of the channel. So hopefully that makes sense. So far, this weekly pullback is about 23% from the prior all-time high. We are down approximately 32%. Okay, I've said before, we can see these corrections. We could see a 40% correction. We could see a 50% correction. I mean, I would argue we could even go down further below that and still be on track. Similar to something, I mean, if we did go farther below that, I don't think it would be sustained very long. But I do think that we're going to see some volatility to the downside as well during this cycle, and it's not going to just be a straight monotonic move to the upside. So I think this is a pretty big test here at the 21-week EMA, the 20-week SMA. Obviously, we're $4,000 below that at the current time. We'll see if we can hold it. If not, it's not the end of the world. In my opinion, it would just represent an opportunity. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up. Remember to check out the premium list. You can find a link to the sale in the description below if you want to lock in the lower rate. Also, remember we have the What's a Few Trillion or What's a Few Trillion Among Friends t-shirts. You guys can check that out at store.intothe-cryptoverse.com. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see if we can get back above the 20-week SMA. And even if we do, even if we are able to get back above it, remember, the test of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA, they can last for months. Okay, so let's not assume that even getting back above it, we're immediately going to go back up. We know that those tests can last for a long time. Make sure you guys subscribe. Click the bell icon to turn on your notifications. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.